Welcome to Science Radio, a space where we chat about culture, belief, wellness, and current events, all through the lens of faith.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Science Radio. My name's Jesse, I'll be your host today, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host who is in the studio with me today. It's who introduces herself with a catchphrase like she's a WWE wrestler. Zanita!
Hello, everyone.
Everyone says hello. But we're also joined by our guest, the blast from the past.
Woohoo!
Hashtag best Fairfax. Jokes. She's not a Fairfax anymore.
No, not anymore.
Hacko.
She's a Hacko.
Good last name.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Maryellen. Hello, Maryellen.
Hello, Jesse. Hello, Zanita. Thanks for having me. I'm stoked to be. I love this dynamic between the two of you. It's like very upbeat, very energetic. It's great.
Good.
Zanita brings that Gold Coast energy, you know.
Yes.
It's all about sunshine, joy.
Fresh breeze.
Yeah, all us hustlers in Sydney need more of that. So please
That's
stay
right.
as long as you
I
like.
keep saying, move the office up north.
We could all be surfing in the
Yeah.
morning, you know.
It's like
wow.
Patagonia, we can take breaks to go ride the waves.
Ride the waves, bro. Yeah. Okay. All right. We're not talking about that today. See, I just want to warn you guys ahead of time, dear listeners, that this could easily go off track because of this dynamic. But hopefully you'll stick with us through the ride. Either way, it's going to be good. Maryellen, you have been away from us for a little while now.
I know the prodigal daughter has returned.
Yes, that's right. And we're proud to announce that she is now joining the Signs of the Times. No, I'm joking.
She's back.
She's back. No.
Move over.
That the wish fulfillment unfortunately won't extend that far today. However, you wrote a fantastic article for us recently in this very issue, the October issue of the Science of the Times magazine, which we were stoked about your trip all the way over to Southeast Asia, and some of the musings, some of the thought-provoking thoughts that
I do like my thoughts to be thought-provoking. So
yes. So a really interesting conversation. I can't wait. But I think it might be a good opportunity right at the top to talk about what has been going on in the world of Maryellen since last we spoke, or since last you graced these airwaves.
Yeah. Well, I was saying to you before, the last time I graced these airwaves, I'm pretty sure I think it was Daniel Kubrick who was the host. So this is going back almost 2 years now, I think. So since leaving this beautiful community here at Adventist Media, cry tears, I have essentially started my own business. So like long story short, I now freelance and I do a lot of work with the church still. So I've written this article for you guys, for example, but I also work a lot with the South Pacific Division and even like the GC and stuff, writing for them, doing design for them, even some research, which has been really, really interesting. But yeah, anything from writing to illustration is kind of my niche. If you want, I don't even know if I could call it a niche, but yeah, anything creative is my niche.
And we will put in the show notes, but you have some really great social media presence as well. Particularly, is Instagram your main thing?
Definitely. Instagram is my, I guess you could call it Achilles heel. I'm on it all the time. So, yeah, definitely check me out there.
What's the Instagram stuff about? Can you kind of explain your thought process behind what you do on Instagram?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like a bit of an imposter even saying this because, it's just kind of a hobby, I suppose. But I talk a lot about creativity and I talk a lot about rest and sort of the intersection between the two, how creatives can find inspiration and motivation and like, I guess, a sustainable practice, but also how that all relates to faith and how God has designed us. God is the creator and he's created us to rest and sort of all the conversations that happen there. Because I know for me personally and for a lot of people that I interact with on Instagram and in person, that's a huge problem in our society, finding that rest. So that's what I love to talk about.
So cool.
While we're on that, can you talk a little bit about, because I know when people think of creativity, they often think of like people looking at scenery and painting something and like just slowly arranging things. And, like creativity kind of comes across as like a slow-paced, relaxing kind of thing. But obviously that's not your experience and you still have a lot of jobs and are probably still trying to cram them in. Like,
yeah.
Can you just like speak into that a little bit? Like, is creativity for you and is your job like slow paced and
Oh, yeah, that's such a good. I love these questions. I never get asked these questions, so it feels so good to like be able to speak into it. Yeah, I would say in the overarching scheme of things, my creative expression is not a relaxing thing, because when you have to make money, that comes with deadlines, that comes with hustling, that comes with organization, all kinds of things, and it really is a catch-22, because I think creativity in its essence is sort of freedom. It's the ability to just be and think and write poetry or, whatever your particular niche is. So it is definitely difficult. You can't have creativity on tap, and so, yeah, the whole creative business thing can be a bit of a misnomer, I think, because it's often more hustle than it is creative. Yeah, I don't know.
All right. Well, why don't you talk to us about this trip? Because this was a trip that was long expected, something that you and your sisters were looking forward to for a while, and kind of a big deal, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's just a holiday, but at the same time, it was a big deal for us. Yeah. It was the first overseas trip that me and my two younger sisters had ever taken together. So yeah, very different from the everyday kind of routine that we were in. We spent, I think it was 8 or 9 days in Singapore about 3 or 4 months ago. And it was just this chance to just kind of do nothing. Singapore is, I want to say, Southeast Asia for beginners. It's very, if you haven't been, it's very Western, very easy to navigate. So it's just this chill time, going to the shops, going to the gardens, bike riding around, going swimming, all that kind of stuff. And so my anticipation was that it would be this really lovely time for quality connection, quality time together. And yet, as I reflect on in this article, I found myself on a street corner near the hawker markets, one of the hawker markets in Singapore, near Chinatown. And I was rushing ahead. I was so anxious to get to these markets. And then I stopped myself, and I look behind me, and my sister's 50 meters behind, trying to catch up to my crazy pace, which I'm not even really conscious of until that moment. And I look at my watch, and it's 2:00, and I'm like, what am I rushing for? Why do I have this ingrained sense that I'm running behind, we need to get there on time? What's the point? So that really stopped me in my tracks, because for all of my talk about rest and for all of my talk about slow living, I was like, dang, I'm an imposter. This is not real. I'm still this super type A, highly strung person inside,
Yeah, I'm sure we all know those people who are constantly walking ahead of other people. That's me. And who arrive to, I don't know, an event, and then they're all of a sudden, all right, next place to go, and who are just constantly doof, doof, doof. Do you know where that kind of comes from?
Oh, well, for me, and I do reflect on this a little bit in my article, it came from my dad, I want to say. It was a learned behavior. I'm not to, say anything bad about him at all. It's just who he is. It's who I am. As a kid, he was the Pathfinder director. He was off in front. He was the one paving the way, go, go, go. And even now, I am the child of a second marriage. So my dad is 81. You'd think he's kind of, this old dude who can't do very much. He's still doing Pathfinders. My parents bought a farm. He's chopping down trees. So he's very active. And on one hand, I love that. And I love the fact that it's his to-do list. It's his kind of hustling that keeps him going. It keeps him active. But on the other hand, I guess in my quote unquote, I don't want to call it wisdom, but in my, I guess, seeing more of the world, I'm like, that's not really what life's about though. So yeah, I guess that's where I learned it. But I think it's not only learned through our parents or people that we've sort of mirrored growing up. It's through teachers, it's through movies, it's through social media. It's all of these different avenues where we see, the 22-year-old who's got a 7-figure business, who's now a judge on Shark Tank or whatever. And it's I don't know, we just see it all the time. And it's this message we keep getting. So yeah.
Did you grow up most all of your life in Sydney?
I did, yeah. Born and bred, very close to Wahroonga my whole life. So yeah.
I mean, I'm just wondering out loud. I mean, I lived in Palmerston North, New Zealand 2 years ago, which is just about the opposite of Sydney as you can probably get, bar going out to a hut in the middle of nowhere. But
amazing.
The pace of life is a country town. You drive 10 minutes from one side and you've basically out of the other side of the city. city, quote unquote, right? 100,000 people versus, 6 million people that they say it's going to be like in 2025 or something like that in Sydney. There is a certain sense that I've noticed since moving here that maybe is unconscious in Sydney-siders. You don't move here to have a relaxing time, it seems.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that something that you've noticed, or is that sort of just an ingrained thing, do you think, for Sydney-siders?
It's a really interesting question. I was reflecting on this a little while ago. My husband and I had the privilege of getting to go to Switzerland, like his work. And we were just sitting by the lakes there on a picnic rug, on holidays, nothing to do, nowhere to be. And this guy comes up to us, sort of middle-aged, and he just struck up this beautiful conversation with us. And it was so strange to me because I almost didn't even know how to react. I was like, does this guy want something? Like, is he trying to sell me something? Like, what's happening? No, he was just there to just have a conversation. And he shared some wisdom about, his life and his journey. He had lung cancer, and it was like this whole story. And I walked away from that being like, wow, we in Sydney at least, and I guess in any major metro sort of business region of the world, we don't take time. We don't have time for stories. We always have somewhere else to be. And so things like creativity, things like stories are like this luxury. And even, talking to someone, asking them how they're really going. For me, if I'm asking someone that, I almost feel like I'm a bother. It's like, I shouldn't be interrupting you. You've probably got somewhere to be. I'm not going to give you a call. I'm not going to spend time with you. I might text you so we can catch up in 3 weeks' time because then I know I'm not bothering you. But, we don't have those encounters as much. So I think it's definitely a product of where you're born, that mentality, definitely.
Yeah, I definitely notice that when I come to Sydney as well. I sometimes notice that the Gold Coast is definitely more relaxed. But I'll even go on hikes because when you're on a hike, everyone will at least say hello or they'll give you eye contact.
Yeah.
But especially in Sydney, it's people are just head down, they're cutting it to where they're going to go.
Absolutely.
And they don't even dodge you. They just...
Oh, man. I take my dog on a walk down Fox Valley Road here. I want to say every day, but that's not the truth. I try to take him on a walk every day. There's this one guy that I always walk past. I've never said hello to him. I've come to the point where I've tried to say hello, but then he you know how you have eye contact and then you just look away sort of thing. I don't know how many, it would have been dozens of times I've seen the same guy because he walks at the same time that I do, never said hello, always kind of sort of gotten to the point of making eye contact. So Guy, if you're out there, I'm sorry. I'm sure you're a great person, but it's hard, hard. I get self-conscious. Oh no. Do I want to talk? Does he want to talk? No. Oh, I just won't try.
Yeah. It's almost like we've become afraid of connection, afraid of vulnerability. I know I do that personally. Those people that you sort of see in passing or you kind of know, but you don't have time to interact with them. That's a very common experience for me, and I often feel really awkward in those situations. So I definitely resonate. Yeah. It
is interesting, though, this idea of we're so busy that we don't have time. It's I think you mentioned John Mark Comer in your piece. And I think one thing he says is rest is incompatible with the way of Jesus or if we are all spiritual, and so hurry for us, it's if we don't have time for people, we're missing the point.
Absolutely.
What we're supposed to be doing here. And I just think it's really interesting.
Yeah.
I think it gets in the way of a lot of people and whatever their spiritual beliefs are.
Yeah. Sort of this, at least I've had this experience a lot in my journey of faith, your church attendance, your relationship with God just becomes about doing stuff.
Yep.
It's very seldom, even in church scenarios, you're having Bible studies with people, you're just communing with people, and there's still always somewhere to be and something else to do, and I've got to go do the offering announcement now or whatever, and it's this exhausting thing. I'm
not even pastoring a church right now in Sydney, and I feel overwhelmed sometimes as a church member. Just there's I go to my local church and there's a prayer breakfast on, followed by a youth morning tea, followed by Sabbath school, followed by worship, followed by an afternoon program, followed by a social, followed by a working bee on Sunday morning. It's just when do you people stop?
I know, right?
All of a sudden, it's not restful.
What is this Sabbath thing? It's ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, we're not primarily, talking to a church audience right now, but it's hard to escape it.
Oh, it is. It really is. Yeah.
So,
and a lot of these big names and kind of the rest spirituality community like John Mark Comer, like AJ Swoboda, Rich Villadis, a few of these guys, they often talk about keeping, because they, most of them are pastors of these mega churches, like 6 services on a Sunday or whatever. And a lot of them talk about, rather than keeping Sabbath on their Sunday, I guess, which is different for us, but that's fine. They'll keep it like on a Tuesday, or they will keep it on Sabbath, and then they do all their church stuff on Sunday. And I do sometimes wonder, I guess this is a message more specifically for Seventh-day Adventists. It's like, do we have it right in that sense? Sabbath is meant to be a day of rest, and yet for me, it's usually the busiest one of the week. So,
it's funny. I've had this conversation with a lot of people and pastors, but it almost seems like, maybe this is a topic for a different podcast, but
let's go into it.
It's a rabbit hole. Anyway.
Like we said, we might divert.
Yeah. I've noticed this thing where we get 30-40% of the way there, but then we can't commit fully to the idea. So what I mean by that is we acknowledge that Sabbath is a busy day, that in many ways is incompatible with the spirit of what Sabbath is meant to be, especially in the New Creation, New Testament Church of Jesus. And then we get to that point, but then when it comes to, well, how could we reimagine Sabbath to not be that and to be what the New Testament Church and what Jesus intended it to be? There almost seems like we lock up and we go, there's systemic things there that we just can't deal with.
Yep.
There's an impasse, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. I think I've heard people reflect on sort of a similar situation where they start keeping Sabbath for the first time. Most of these people aren't Adventists, but I think it's kind of the same situation for Adventists, where once you start putting those boundaries in place and saying, actually, Aunt Susie, sorry, we can't come over because it's our Sabbath, people get offended. It's not something that people really understand. And I think it's ironic, isn't it? But in Seventh-day Adventist communities, it has the potential for being very misunderstood.
Yeah.
And I guess offending people in the way that things have always been done. And so, it really is that catch-22.
Yeah, I also have, I think it's quite a trending thing, this slowing down Sabbath thing right now, even for people who aren't Adventists. I know on the Gold Coast a lot of people are doing it who aren't Adventists. And it's really interesting watching them. So I have one friend who she started practicing this day of rest on the weekend. And she actually found it really difficult because she's like, I'm just really bored. And so she doesn't have these different things. Like she doesn't have a church to go to on the day. She doesn't have certain do's or don'ts. She just is trying to rest. So she'll just watch a movie, go have a coffee, just go for walks.
Does she self-identify as a Christian, or is it this is a secular thing that she's doing?
She is a fairly new Christian.
Okay,
yeah. So she is definitely a Christian. But there are other people on the Gold Coast who are just adopting this romanticized, slow living kind of life, which is awesome. But yeah, it's just been interesting watching her, I guess, struggle because she's bored. And I think we want more time all of the time, but if we have too much time, too much spare time, if we were to just go to Singapore for a year and not work and just walk around and do touristy things, we'd probably also get agitated and bored. And you also see this with people who are retiring. They just stop working and they don't have any hobbies and they just I don't know what the right word is.
Well, no. This is true. This is true.
Yeah, it's statistically true. Yeah.
It's teachers, I believe, are kind of the worst at this because my wife was a primary school teacher. She shared an article with me ages ago about how teachers, when they retire, statistically are much more likely to die earlier because their whole life has been structure, busy bringing work home, getting up early, going to school, doing all this stuff. And then as soon as they retire, it's all gone. And what have they got to live for anymore?
Yeah. So there has to be a balance with everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's often something that I've definitely wrestled with is that boredom aspect because I am just naturally wired to just want to do everything all the time, go. And the penny sort of dropped for me as I was investigating this slow living movement, the Sabbath and that sort of thing, that a lot of people when they first read the term slow living, they think, oh, heck, okay, I've got to stop all the things I'm doing and structure my life in a way that still gets everything done but is really slow and chill now. And it's like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like it doesn't work. And I think the real message, at least for me, how I understand it of slow living, is being able to separate your worth from your work. So that's really, I guess, the gospel message as well, in a way, because Jesus says, you are loved as you are. Like, you are all valuable. You don't have to prove anything. Nothing you do will make me love you any more or any less. And so I think just that knowledge that the things that we do don't determine how valuable we are gives us that permission to say no to the things that actually don't align with what we really want to do or want to be, and just those things that we're doing to impress other people. So that really does speak into that Sabbath conversation a lot and how we keep Saturday, but there's probably a whole can of worms. But work and worth, I think, is really the equation there.
Yeah. No, I think on the flip side of that, with what you're saying, I recently read an article just yesterday about the CEO of a hedge fund manager in a hedge fund in New York, who recently did an interview with Bloomberg saying, and they asked him, is it true? There was a rumor going around that he had spent, in the time that he was at this particular hedge fund, about 2,000 hours in his office, not going home. So he would sleep in his office.
Wow.
He would get up at 1 a.m., answer emails, do business, go back to he with a wife and family, by the way.
Yeah. Wow.
So he lives in New York. She lives in Washington, D.C. or something like that, and works there. And he said, it's been hard, relationships have suffered, but, it's been worth it.
Oh, what?
And I'm just thinking, is this what people are looking up to? Is this the sort of behavior that we are trying to instill in our workforce, that this is what you should attain to? I mean, we're seeing this more and more post-COVID of, working from home was all very well during the pandemic, but we got to get back to the office.
Crack that whip.
I'm seeing more and more articles of CEOs going, well, that working from home, that's a thing of the past. We've got to get people back in the office full time, which is great if you're a CEO that has a penthouse apartment in the city. But if you're having to commute in from the suburbs, there's this disconnect from reality, I think, where we're it almost seems like companies are trying to make up for lost time. There's this expectation of never-ending perpetual growth that is not really sustainable, maybe?
No. Logically, it's unrealistic. And I mean, to use a very specific biblical example, in the Old Testament, God was instructing, the Israelites to let the land rest every 7 years. And it's there's a reason for that. You can't expect perpetual growth. But that's so interesting. Like you said, I think it really speaks into where a lot of us in 21st century Western culture get our identity from. Our identity is our work. It's what we do. It's the first thing we say, hi, my name's Maryellen. I'm a XYZ. And I think it's an interesting exercise to sort of, maybe we can do it. I don't know if you want to do it, to introduce yourself without using what you do.
Yeah, but how?
How
do you do that?
Well, you just ask them a question straight away and then you avoid introducing. Hi, I'm Zanita. What do you like to do for fun?
What do you do for fun?
The classic.
What's your favorite color?
I once went up to someone and was like, hi, I'm Zanita. Tell me your life story. And I quickly realized that wasn't the best method because they don't know anything about you.
Yeah.
They're not gonna,
You kind of freeze as well. It's oh my goodness, you're not expecting
it.
Oh man, but it's true. I've asked people that question before, and sometimes it is embarrassing. Oh, I'm between jobs. Oh, I'm a full-time mum, or I'm this, that, or the other thing, which is all perfectly valid. But I think it definitely gets the heart of that idea, which is that we equate our identity with our work, our worth with our work, sort of thing, which is. Yeah, it's pretty upside down. It's not like describing myself as the associate editor of the Signs of the Times magazine really gives many people an indication of who I am as a person.
Well, yeah,
it says nothing about me.
No, you're a foodie, you love cooking, you've got a dog, you've got all kinds of things.
All those things are much. If anybody's listening from the editorial team, I mean, realistically, at the end of the day, all those things are more important than just the job that I do. As important as the job is that I do, I could change jobs. I could get fired. I could get transferred, and if I base all that I am on my job, then if that falls through, who am I?
Yeah.
I guess it's also like it's not like society has told us that we get our value or identity from our job. It's just kind of subconsciously we've thought that, because no one's directly said that. But I think if like we all believe in God, if you don't believe in a God, then you're going to go to something to get your value and your identity from. And it's like,
but even if you do believe in God, you're still by default. And I think this conversation, it's been like very focused on, your job is your identity. But I think even beyond that, there's probably, stay-at-home mums whose identity becomes their children. That's
right.
a really common thing.
That's
or, for me, like my creative talents, they really become my identity. It's like, oh, I can paint, that's sort of who I am. And I think, it doesn't matter what area of life we find ourselves in, we will always resort to whatever the main thing is in that niche, like that identity, which is really sad. I don't know. It's challenging as a Christian. Capitalism, yeah. One word to solve it all.
Well, I think as well there is a systemic commodification of gifts and talents, because as you were, talking about earlier, your creativity is all well and good, but if it ain't bringing in any money, then kind of what is it worth?
Yeah.
In a way, like that's a very scary, and it almost sounds monstrous for me to say that. But the reality is, I wouldn't be making this magazine if it didn't make Adventist Media money.
Well, yeah.
If it was costing us an endless, and to a certain extent, it kind of does. But if it wasn't actually, if there wasn't some return, either ministry return or financial return, or hopefully both, then we wouldn't do it. And all of these beautiful thoughts and wonderful ideas, kind of useless.
Yeah. And I think, God understands that. And I've seen this new wave of people in sort of ministry, monetizing their ministry online. And I think like at first you're like, oh, that's a bit, kind of sits a bit weird. But then you think about it and it's like, well, God says he's going to provide our needs, And again, I think it's being able to remove the equation, like my work equals money versus like my work and God also provides for me. If those two things can somehow in your mind become separate, I'm no expert at this. I'm not claiming I've done that right. But anyway, if you can do that, it just, helps, I think. But that requires a lot of trust and, realigning your identity in God, I think.
I wonder if there's a way that we
I was
can...
also going to start with, I wonder if...
For those of you listening, Zanita and I just shared a look when we both were about to say something at the same time, and she so graciously allowed me to go first.
You're welcome.
And then cut me off.
I was shocked.
It's a wonderful thing. I wonder if there's a way that we can reimagine what work looks like, because when I think of the first story that humans told, the Genesis story, it's not God making man and woman and saying, well, just go and sit by the beach and drink margaritas,
Yeah.
There was some component of work, of effort, of creativity, of something in there, something perhaps from a Christian perspective that you could say is a God-instilled idea in us to do stuff, to build things, to create art, to write songs and poetry. What does that look like in a world that's a little less weighed down by the pressures and the stresses of modern 21st century life? So a very small question, light question for you, Maryellen.
Solve the world
Yeah,
problems.
solve the world.
Well, I definitely can't speak to all of that, but I think something I've noticed in my own life and something I've always tried to live by is that verse. In everything you do it for the glory of God. And that's so beautiful. It's like, don't do it for the money, don't do it for the acclaim, do it for God. And there's been a few projects even this year. And okay, disclaimer, I am not a very good businesswoman. Like when it comes to invoicing, it's not my strong suit, okay? So any business people, don't take advice from me. But there's been a few projects this year where I have like underquoted, anticipating it to be, a week project or a day, whatever. And it's been like 2 weeks or a month. And it kind of just blows out of proportion. And there are times when, okay, you probably should be charging more. But there are also times when you just want to do that job right because it's a ministry or it's just something that you want to be proud of. And I think in a perfect world where money isn't our livelihoods, I don't know, you would just work on something until it was something you were just really proud of. You know, you just do something for the enjoyment of it and for the end product being something that you were like, this, you know, I'm proud of this. This is uplifting in some way. This is serving a purpose and this is glorifying God. So it's like, I guess, long story short, making stuff void of the outcome. But again, we live in capitalism. So like, but if there are just little ways that you can introduce that concept into your life a bit more, maybe on Sabbath, rather than doing nothing and being bored, you just create for the fun of it rather than creating for XYZ, that kind of thing. Yeah.
There's so many lanes I want to go down now. I'm kind of thinking about the people who I think we all enjoy our jobs somewhat, mostly.
She's saying that a question, looking at me. I don't know why.
Just because of your comment before.
I do like my
I
job.
feel confident in saying that me and Maryellen like our jobs. Anyway, what I'm meaning is that there's a lot of people who, I guess, are in jobs that aren't their ideal and that they don't really have an avenue out of. They don't really know what they want to do. And I think a lot of people's jobs can bring that, like, burnout. But there's not really a clear way out. And so I'm kind of wondering if you have, I guess, adopted any hacks or habits or like just small things that have helped you maybe when you weren't in the position you're in now, when you were super busy and when you were super stretched, that helped you just to kind of find more peace.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. I think one thing I could share, and this has a lot to do with kind of the, I don't want to say timelines or like rhythms around your creative practice. In times where even in my job now or in like past work I've done, where I felt creatively like stifled or like I just don't have time for what I really want to be doing, which is, you know, painting or, I don't know, just big creative projects, I will take like 5 minutes or 10 minutes in my day. And rather than trying to paint a Picasso or whatever, you know, some really grand masterpiece, you just do the smallest amount that you can fit into that time. So it's actually one of the reasons recently I've been writing a lot of poetry, because in 5 minutes you can kind of condense all of those feelings inside that you're feeling into like a beautifully worded little phrase. And it's just so satisfying. And I've actually recently kind of compiled them and it's kind of turned into a project. But just like doing the smallest amount possible in regular intervals, I think is something that's helped me. But I don't know if that really answers the question. I'm not sure. Like, yeah.
Any advice, Jesse? Have you ever found yourself in this position?
Oh, yeah, for sure. One of the reasons why I started the first podcast that I started was because I wasn't feeling like I was super in my lane, like work-wise. Like I was doing stuff because that was kind of the responsibility that I was given and I was trying to do my best, but it really wasn't that life-giving. So I thought, what can I do? Like I know that I want to do something ministry related. So maybe this doesn't really speak to those people who don't have that sort of Christian background, but I think you could just translate that to whatever you're doing, like whether it's in finance or art or whatever. And so I started doing little things on the side that kind of was in the same lane as the work that I was currently doing, but was way more like giving in terms of like I felt like I was giving and it was giving back to me. And I think it's actually really cool because one of the reasons why I am where I am right now is because I started doing that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
totally.
like so that I'm now doing writing and podcasting and making silly little TikTok videos and all that sort of
They're
stuff.
Not silly, they're great. I love them.
Thanks, Maryellen. Because of that, like, I'm not going to say like start making a thing and you'll end up getting a job out of it. You may not, but I definitely think that it's a good way to stay sane.
Yeah. And I think also in that conversation, there's a lot to be said about understanding sort of seasons of your life.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can't do everything at once. There's that quote, it's like you can't you can't do everything at once, but you can have everything eventually or something like that.
Yeah,
and
right.
it's like not trying to do the podcasting and the writing and the pastoring and this and that and the other all at the same time because you just burn out and ugh. But doing just one thing and recognizing that this will end and then maybe it'll lead to other things. And one day I can have a garden and like, you know, on a farm somewhere or whatever it is you want. Like,
Oh, that
Yeah,
sounds great.
I often think because I feel like this slowing down busyness thing is quite a trendy topic right now.
Yep.
And a lot of the, I hope this isn't sexist, but a lot of the people talking about it are males.
Interesting.
And I often think about the like mothers listening to these podcasts, and I'm like, because I just imagine myself as a mother. I'm like, I don't know if it's all that realistic.
Yeah.
Like you don't
like
have,
if you have young kids or
yeah,
whatever.
I know you don't have children, but you've got ducks now. Like, they are quite
Who are much lower maintenance than children for anyone. Not the same thing.
But I don't know. I just often like wonder, like, I wonder what their perspective on this would be.
Yeah, I often think that as well. Yeah, it's and again, it kind of comes back to not trying to live your life really slowly and, you know, bake the bread in the morning for the children when they wake up and all this stuff. Like, it's lovely if you do that, great, but it's not realistic for most of us. But again, like separating your work, what you do from your worth and how it defines you. Like if you get really angry at your kids one day and it's just like a crazy day, just realize that, again, this is a season and you as a mother and your worth as a woman and a human being is not determined by how well you can sew or whatever. Like, you know, it's not determined by that. So, yeah.
And I think like there's this awesome book, I don't know if you've read, it's called The Liturgy of the Ordinary.
Oh, it's on my list. It's like, I think
Yeah,
2 away.
it's
I'm like
so
going
good.
through.
It's not about motherhood, but it could definitely translate to that. But it's about how you can find, it's basically how you can worship in all of your various daily things. So it's and I think when you have a different mindset, it's like you can be doing a lot of things and still have this mindset of like rest.
Yeah.
Because I think there is a bit of a distinction. It's like you can have a lot of things to do but not feel rushed and busy, but just be moving through it. Or you can have a lot of things to do and be like, oh, I've got so much to do. This is crazy. And then collapse. Like I think it, because I think busyness, it's not bad to have things to do, and I don't know.
Some people thrive off it and some people just,
That's it.
yeah.
We're all different.
Like you said, it's seasonal.
Yeah, it's seasonal, and people have different nervous systems, different capacities for stress. I know my stress capacity is not very high, but my ability to like do a lot of things is pretty high, whereas other people would be total opposite. And so it's like, yeah, just don't compare your timeline and your capacity with someone else's, which is really hard in social media world, but yeah.
Yeah. I want to, I think, bring this to a close around this idea that you finished the article with Martha. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about sort of that little vignette in Jesus's life and sort of how it spoke to you?
Yeah, that's always been a story in Scripture, in Luke chapter 10. That's always sat with me because I've always identified as Martha. I guess for context, if you don't know the story, Jesus comes to the home of Mary and Martha and Lazarus, and Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus just like absorbing everything he's saying, I imagine with the disciples and such. And Martha is kind of running around, cooking the food, making everyone comfortable, blah, 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 in and out of the kitchen. And, you know, Jesus says to her, Martha asked Mary, like, why don't you help me? Come on, we have all these guests over, you need to help me. And Jesus stops her and said, like, don't take away from Mary what is hers. She's chosen sort of the right thing. That's her butchering it a bit, but that's kind of the gist. And I've always sort of seen Jesus's response to Martha as something that is a bit of a rebuke. It's like, how dare you, prioritize cooking food for everyone over spending time with me, which is like a story of, I'm guessing most of our lives,
Yeah.
But actually in verse 41, I'm just reading it here, Jesus repeats, he says, Martha, Martha. And this isn't like, we kind of read that as like, oh, he's like repeating it because he's upset or something. Tisk, tisk, exactly. But it's actually a term of endearment. Like repeating someone's name is a term of endearment. And it sort of shows Jesus' empathy and understanding that, like, yes, we do have things we have to do, but just remembering what is most important when, rather than having everything important all at once all the time, like prioritizing. And so, I don't know. I think, it's just I've sort of absorbed God's grace in that a little bit and realized that actually my tendency for busyness isn't a bad thing. I just have to remember to keep what's important the important thing.
I guess that kind of comes full circle. Your piece was about your trip with your sisters, and how you were like so busy, and so it was like you kind of came to this point where you realized, oh, I'm here for like
quality time.
Yeah.
And I'm rushing around for no reason. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's cool. Look, I think that's a beautiful thing. Jesus sees each one of us, and he sees us compassionately in whatever it is that we're struggling in this area, whether we're highly strung, whether we could probably afford to be a little bit more highly strung, or
somewhere in between.
somewhere wherever we. I love that idea that he sees us. He truly sees us. He truly sees Martha in this story. He's not just talking to her in her behavior. He's talking to her in what is driving that, what is behind that idea, and he does it with compassion, which I think is, it's a really beautiful thing. It's a beautiful moment to see what Jesus is actually like.
Yeah, I can't wait until that episode is in The Chosen. If anyone isn't watching that, please watch The Chosen. So excited. It's going to be so good.
Awesome. Maryellen, do you want to just quickly plug your Instagram and anything else that you'd like to plug? We'll put it in the show notes as well, but just so that people know.
So kind. My Instagram is my name, Maryellen Hacko. It's Maryellen Hacko on most platforms now, on YouTube as well if you're interested. But yeah, I mean, I'm just a humble gal posting some carousels occasionally. So feel free or feel free not to. It's fine.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
Awesome.
Hey, thank you, Zaneeta.
Thank you, Maryellen.
Thank you, Jesse.
Wow. It's really come full circle, literally. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody else, for listening.
Thank you for joining us.
And
awesome.
We'll see you next time in a fantastic episode of Science Radio. Bye-bye.
This episode was based on an article appearing in this month's Science of the Times magazine. A print subscription is $28 a year, or just $14 for a digital subscription. To find out more, visit scienceofthettimes.org.au.
This is an Adventist Media podcast.